So Niels and Danny will take you through the holistic customer journey of ice cream consumption, specifically for the Breyers brand. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tina. Well, thanks everyone for being here. You're in a good place because if you read the grit report, Danny's with Unilever, as you heard, and they're ranked third as most innovative client. I'm at Insights, and we're ranked fourth. So collectively, this is probably the highest of the grit you will get on stage at this conference. We're going to talk to you about ice cream. And ice cream is such a nice category. A good friend of mine who also works at Unilever told me once, we develop a lot of products, he said, that people really don't need. Like, you know, you could debate about deodorant, and then those are the things that people actually need a little bit. But ice cream is something that people really don't need. But it's such a product that brings about happiness. And I have 3 little kids. I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old, and I really recognize that in there as well. My 10-year-old and my 6-year-old love ice cream. My second son is probably one of the very few kids in the world that doesn't like ice cream. And I said, Matisse, why didn't you like ice cream? And he said, Dad, it's too cold. So, Danny, if you could invent an ice cream that is warm, he would be very thankful to you. But it does bring him happiness because he likes to let it melt and then eat it. He likes to make smoothies and milkshakes. He likes to scoop it. So for him, ice cream is, you know, creating happiness as much as for his brother and sister. And that's what we actually wanted to do. We wanted to tap into the consumer journey from a very human perspective and a holistic approach. So more concretely, Unilever came to us and said, you know, we have these, you know, 14 SKUs within the Breyers portfolio. We have a pledge, and we really want to understand how that, you know, how those SKUs match the pledge, and if not, what corrective action we should be taking. I won't go over these in detail, but it basically boiled down to understanding the shopping behavior as well as the consumption behavior, both from, you know, planning the shopping to all the way to disposing the packaging. We wanted to get some initial pledge feedback, so not tied necessarily to the product, but then we wanted to really make sure we could align the product, each of the SKUs, to the pledge. So if you would get a challenge like that, you know, there's a lot of traditional methods you could use, and you know, you could think about, oh, let's do a shop along, let's do in-home ethnography. You could do virtual store simulations. You could do eye tracking. You could probably name a couple of other alternatives, but we didn't feel that that was the approach we really wanted to do, because as Keith Weath from Unilever says, is that people are only shopper or a consumer for a very small portion of the day. For the rest of the day, they're really humans. So we needed to you know, get a different approach to this. If you do typically a shop-along or a consumer journey story, oftentimes you can find somebody into one specific product, or even one SKU, and you would, you know, approach it in a very confined perspective. We wanted a holistic outlook. We really wanted to, you know, people could even talk about their meals around it if they would want it to. So we really wanted to get a holistic approach on the ice cream consumption. If you would go and do a in-home ethnography, it would really be consumers being led by researchers and pictures being taken, and if at all, and being looked over their shoulders. We really wanted consumers or humans to be in the lead. We gave them missions, of course, to complete, but you know, the boundaries were here, and they were allowed to move around and use their creativity as they saw fit. Oftentimes when we deliver research, it's a one-way presentation. Well, what we always try to do, and especially also in this case, was to build a number of interactive tools such that Unilever could increase the shelf life of this, you know, pretty audiovisual and illustrative approach. So we wanted to get a holistic view. We wanted to be really, that was probably the most important one, the humans to be in the lead and building interactive tools to increase the ROI of insights. So we built the Insight Scoop community. I won't go into the details, but it has different rooms. It's designed to the category. Maybe an important thing is what we often do as a not a gimmick, but in this research it was relevant actually from a design perspective. At first it wasn't branded, it wasn't Breyers branded. We invited consumers, by the way, who were Breyers loyals. They had to consume Breyers predominantly when they ate ice cream. But we didn't say it was for Breyers in the beginning. And then we did a big reveal, which you kind of gamify or make it playful. And then we obviously went into all the SKUs. We generated over 3,300 consumer stories. If you compare that to a focus group, as one of my colleagues, Julia, mentioned in her presentation, it's about a 50 times more interaction or more consumer stories than a traditional focus group. So very rich, it lasted for about 3 weeks. And we had people do lots of creative stuff. These are a couple of pictures of the consumers. So we engaged with 88 consumers, and they're actual pictures of the people, and we do have consent to use those. And a couple of quotes. If you look at it, people really start to interact with each other. We had the first presentation in this session about incontinence, and that was kind of therapy. Well, it doesn't really have to be only that type of category. Even for ice cream, people start to ask each other, are you doing the same thing? My kids, and what flavors do your kids enjoy? Or which flavor was yours growing up? So people start an actual conversation and are really engaged into the whole platform. And they really love the experience. I'll just let a video run that illustrates that.
First, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity because it was a blast. My family had just so much fun trying your ice cream and discovering the different flavors. As far as recommendations, I would keep doing what you're doing because you're doing a great job.
We trimmed that video, but she actually goes into recommending. The video lasts for about 3 or 4 minutes. And she really starts giving recommendations. We trimmed that for confidentiality reasons. But the reason I'm showing it here is that she doesn't refer to herself as a respondent no, she talks about as a human. And she says her family enjoyed her being a participant in the community. So it's a very holistic engagement, and people are really thankful for the fun that we have them do. And for us, it's very important that when we run a community, we call it a consumer consulting board. If we run one of those, that is a positive brand touchpoint experience. So that's very important. Like research, why would it be boring? We really want people to want to participate. If you look at the numbers, we compare it. We don't really have a lot of dropout throughout, but you have to be careful. You always have to over-recruit and take some measures. Here we had 20% less dropout. And we basically did the same thing as we always do, a very creative approach, but we think that also has to do with the product category actually. Almost everyone out of those 88 people completed 2 shopper missions, and it wasn't easy things to do. We asked them to go out and assign them the 2 Breyers SKUs plus a competitor. They had to go out to a store and actually buy it and come back and talk about their consumption. Roughly over the course of 3 weeks, these consumers consumed about 25,000 ounces of ice cream. Sounds big. It's about 750 liters for people that are in the metric system. I'm not sure it shows up in your Nielsen numbers, but it is significant, and it's just to show you that it was beyond our expectations as well. Next to the conversations, we generated over 2,700 pictures and 40 videos. Again, which is something that is very hard to achieve in a focus group because you're there in that moment, or even in an in-home ethnography, it's very hard to do. But these were actual, rough, authentic things. Some of them were better than others, and some people make really nice pictures. Some pictures were blurry, but you could still get what they were saying. And people really went the extra mile. Admittedly, we made a little mistake in sending some people out to a store in a region to find a specific SKU which wasn't there. Oops, that happens. But then people were reporting, I went to 3 stores and I couldn't find it. So people really went all the way. Even if there was a little out of stock, they would go to another store and shop for it. We had them do blind taste testing, so we gave them instructions on how to do it and give them a little sheet. They would say how to present it, and they would literally present the ice cream to their family and get reactions from that. They loved that exercise. We often get the question, do you pay these people? We pay them about $75 for a 3-week engagement, which I think is nothing. We really play on the intrinsic motivation. On top of that, here, they had to pre-finance their ice cream. So they had to return the receipts, and it's not $100, but it's easily $30 for 3 weeks, and people just made no problem out in doing that. They also thanked us in the sense that for them it was a discovery. We had them taste and try SKUs they never had done before, or they wouldn't do. One of the key elements that I wanted to take out of this is the following.
Hello, Breyers community. Thank you so much for your participation. Reading what you guys have said has been truly enlightening and inspiring. I love waking up every morning and seeing what you're going to say next. It's always surprising and interesting. My name is Danny Blatt, and I work for R&D Breyers. I help our chefs develop products that we know you're going to love, and let me tell you how much this has helped us. Thanks again for your participation, and hopefully you'll get to see some of these new products you're helping us develop on shelf soon. Thanks again.
So a very authentic video from Danny. He didn't know I was going to show it, but thank you anyway. But people really like that. You're humanizing the interaction, and it doesn't have to be much. Tina did that before as well when we did a community MasterCard. It seems like a detail and an obvious thing to do, but it humanizes the research engagement. So Danny, take us through a couple of findings.
Thanks, Niels. So as Niels mentioned, ice cream is a highly emotional category, and doing traditional product research will only get you so far. So did was ask consumers to talk about their ice cream, just the way Niels started the presentation. What's your story behind ice cream? And universally, people come back and they start talking about happiness. They don't talk about it's cold, it's creamy, it's sweet. They're talking about the emotions it brings. So this isn't surprising, but it's great to see over and over again. And consumers continue to build on the emotional aspect of it, talking about the nostalgia that it brings. They talk about doing it with their parents, doing it with their kids, and what their kids are doing, and the comfort about the escapism. Kids have a bad day at school, well, ice cream party is a sure way to bring that back. Celebrations after a big baseball game, big soccer game, whatever it is. Ice cream is inherently tied to these great activities. Do I need it, or is it working now?
Away.
We turn this off now so I don't.
You want to keep going?
I'll keep going. So ice cream is highly emotional, and it was really important for us that when we start to study consumers, or humans in this case, what is the emotions and how could we use the product to dial this up? So like I said, traditional product research just wouldn't have gotten there. So what we wanted to do is understand Breyers within the brand competitive landscape, because all ice cream is cold and sweet and whatever, but how does Breyers bring out the emotions better than our competitors, or differently, and what are the things we could own? Talked about the emotional, the rational. There is some rational benefit to ice cream. It makes you feel good, but like Neil said, nobody needs ice cream. You could easily skip that out of your shopping list and you'd be fine. And of course, the symbolic value of ice cream, but let's continue. So looking at the consumer journey, it was really important to understand all of the touch points that a consumer goes through with our product. But more than just them mapping it out like we heard yesterday with how do you tie your shoes, we needed to tap into the emotional aspect of it that a traditional shop along and all of those things wouldn't have gotten us to. So we really wanted to dial into that. And the first thing we did was look at the first part of the consumer journey, which is in the store. What's the emotional element that's going on in the store? What are consumers connecting with? And we learned very clearly what the quality cues are for Breyers, what makes it stand out on shelf. That black color is quite iconic for Breyers, and it instantly brings a feeling of nostalgia because we've been known for it for so long. So that's great to understand. And also, how do they store it at home? How does it compare to the competitors they store? And unfortunately, this consumer is serving Turkey Hill in their ice cream in their freezer, but we'll forgive her for that. And consumption, again, it's a very emotional element, the eating of the ice cream. And consumers have all sorts of tricks they do when they're eating ice cream. Neil's son puts it in the microwave, which from a technical perspective is absolutely horrible, but if that's what they want to do, that's okay. But they all have their own things they do. Dad uses this spoon, the kid uses this scoop. Everyone has their own bowl. There's a huge ritualistic element to eating ice cream that I don't think we would have uncovered in other elements, in a different research method. So it's really interesting. And of course, you see this kid smiling down here. I mean, that is ice cream. It makes us smile. It makes us happy. And so how can Breyers continue to dial that up? And the worst part of ice cream is when it's finished. But we needed to understand what are consumers doing with the pack, because that's still part of the emotional experience, is getting rid of it. And then that's often when they make the decision to buy it again. So we really wanted to understand what we could do from a product perspective to make sure we have congruence throughout the entire human experience. So Niels mentioned at the beginning that the reason we wanted to do this was because of the Breyers pledge. So Breyers took a stand at the beginning of this year, and we came out with our new pledge. And our new pledge is about using all American dairy, no artificial growth hormones in our dairy, no artificial colors, no artificial flavors. Our vanilla and our fruit are 100% sustainably farmed. So we know what that means. We could read those words on a page, we could put it on our pack, put it on our website, and from an R&D, from a brand perspective, we know what we're telling consumers. But consumers interpret that and they say, okay, well, the product should taste like it has no artificial growth hormones, like it has no artificial flavors. But what does that mean? We know that there's no actual product cue. There's no product benefit attribute that does that. But what are the cues that they're using to say, yes, this product is congruent with what Breyers is telling me they're doing? And that was sort of the output we were looking for. And what this method allowed us to do, which I don't think we could have gotten from any other method, was really to understand all of our 12 SKUs, our main SKUs, how they perform versus that pledge. Because consumers ladder the pledge to different cues than I may have from an R&D perspective. So we mapped it not only versus the pledge, but how much they liked the product versus competition. And by using a grid like this, very simple for our marketeers to understand, we were able to say, these 4 SKUs are perfect, keep going. These 3 we need to modify before we can launch this pledge, otherwise we're going to have concerns with our consumers. So what was really great about this approach was that we had extended engagement of the brand team. As we all have, different market, customers and market research internally, we know that some are more and less interested in what we're doing and how we're positioning it and what we're going to do with the findings. What was great about this is through the entire 3 weeks of the community group, the entire team was fully engaged and motivated by what they were hearing. And they kept wanting to ladder it and see, when are we going to get the results? When are we going to get the results? Because they were watching what the consumers were going to say. And as soon as we came with the report, it was very action-oriented because they had watched the evolution over time, so they knew where we were going. And it made it for a very quick action to get it into the marketplace. We were also able to get a much deeper view of how our product compares to our brand promise than we ever have before, while overlaying a competitive lens, which is very difficult to do. Anyone who's done concept product fit knows bringing in the competitive element is often the most difficult thing to do. But with this method, we were able to do that and really understand how Breyers could dial it up from there. So you can't buy happiness, but you can buy ice cream. It's almost the same thing. So thank you, and we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. I lived on Breyers chocolate chip mint ice cream in my 3rd trimester. So it's my favorite. Half a cup is the serving, right?
There's a question right there, Tina.
3 cups is a serving.
Oh, that explained it.
I've never been pregnant, but I also love Breyers mint chocolate chip.
Yeah.
My favorite all time. Question is, so you talked some about the rituals associated with ice cream. I'm curious, a lot of these things, translate very nicely into technical insights. How do you take something like that and translate it from a technical side into something that you can use for the brand?
Interesting. So what we try and do is understand why consumers have these rituals and what they actually are. And then we try and leverage them in our communication to show that we're connected with the consumer and we understand them. And also, it's about designing the product so that it can live during that ritual. So for example, kids love to scoop it. So anyone here who eats Ben & Jerry's knows that's quite a firm, tough thing to scoop. That's not for kids. So for Breyers, we purposely design in elements to make sure that the whole family can enjoy the entire ritual together.
Are you doing quant within this community, surveys with these the consumers in the community? And if so, roughly what percentage of the activities are more quantitative in nature?
Yeah. And in this specific case, we did no quant. So it depends really on the research objective. We have a dual approach to that. So for us, in the first place, a consumer consulting board is a qualitative engagement with an intimate sample of interested and interesting people. So you could do 50, 100, depending on the number of segments, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a rule of thumb. If our clients, or if we have a quantitative objective, we could technically perfectly run a survey within the platform with them. We do eye tracking, we can do implicit measurement, all of that. If your objective is really quantitative though, since you have this intimate sample, what we then typically do is make a boost sample so that we have extra participants that fill out the survey, and then use those survey results and throw it back into the community to discuss them. So technically you can, but the samples are usually not designed for a representative, representative quant study. Yes, please.
I'm curious, from your background, I assume like more on the insight side, when you took this research, particularly since you had so much content, how much did, the sensory side of Breyers, or, even as you talk about ritual and the usage, even design of box, I mean, the various different platforms or different groups within Breyers, how many folks actually got involved or got to see this content to make change beyond what you saw today?
So the entire team, so from R&D to marketing were involved, and R&D, so I'm consumer technical insights, which includes sensory. And what we did do was on the back end of this work, so while the consumers were doing their exercises, we were doing the same exercises internally to translate consumer language into technical language. So, and that's part of what brings the insights to life very quickly, is by mirroring what they're doing, you understand the consumer much, much more deeply to get into that emotional experience.
Yes.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you engaged your colleagues who weren't researchers or on the product side, particularly for a lengthy engagement, for a more longitudinal study. I kind of struggle getting my coworkers to participate in the more exploratory qual research.
Yeah, so what we did was, actually we brought Niels and his team in at the very beginning, and we had a working session. And we said, what do you guys want to learn? How do you want to do this? And by them inputting, they owned the research right from the beginning. And then working with Niels' team, as activities came up, we would have a conversation, who would be interested in this type thing? And I would share it back out and say, the consumers are doing this weekend, you might want to check on Monday. And we would have that conversation. And I do believe they checked based on the conversations, but more than that, it kept it alive for them and really made them feel like they were in control of the research.
You could do a lot of things. You could do newsletter programs. Sometimes we develop even a private social media stream. We sometimes hang like a little A4 posters at coffee corners with on-the-go findings, even just sharing quotes from people. It keeps it alive. There's a lot you could do if you really wanted to do that. Yeah.
Great.
Any other questions?
One question. How do the traditional kind of hardcore insight people within your company react to new platforms like this, and in terms of how they integrate it into the kind of intelligence system and their own, traditional way of finding insights and action, especially leaning a little more to quantitative?
So it's actually been adopted very well, because the insights that we got from here were so clear and actionable, it felt quantitative to the team. Sometimes, I'm sure we've all had this experience, you do qual, and it feels very soft and touchy-feel, should we do this? It was two consumers who said it, but really the design of this space made it feel very actionable, so the team bought right into it. So, huge adoption.
Great. Thank you very much for your attention,
Thank
as
you.
well as for joining us.